For members of the Obsessive Compulsive Gamer Podcast, fighting games are a shared love. We have bonded over intense competitive battles, the results motivating each of us to get good in hopes that the next match would end differently. The seesawing tempo of failure and success has fed our competitive juices, but ultimately, and possibly unexpectedly, led to something far greater: kinship. Though our love of the video game medium spans all genres, the spark that brought us together began with a little series you may have heard of, Fighting Street, or as it's known colloquially, Street Fighter. Yes, we finally kick off the fighting portion of our podcast with a series most credited with popularizing fantastic bouts of pugilism. We discuss the history, impact, and pleasures of Capcom's definitive fighter. So stand up, clench your fist, and be ready to strike. I'll be back after the show. All right, what's up, everybody? Welcome to Obsessive Compulsive Gamer Podcast. This is your host, Bobby. Today, we are covering the topic of Street Fighter. I have with me today Frank, on my screen anyway, showing up right there in the middle, wearing his Third Strike t-shirt. Say hello, Frank.
Hey, what's up, guys?
Don't rub your nipples for the audience, please.
I was rubbing the logo.
My
little nipples
whatever. Are here. I don't know where your nipples are at, Frank. I haven't seen.
Well, I just showed you.
No, you didn't. You just rubbed them.
I showed you right here, and I was rubbing up here.
Moving on. And then in the totally perfect Street Fighter shirt, Joy Division, we have Gino, if you'll please say hello.
Hey guys. What's up?
And he also has a Street Fighter 2 arcade. Now, that's the one-up arcade cabinet, right?
Yeah. One day I'll get a real one. It's just temporary.
And then on the bottom right of my screen with the Goomba icon, we got our buddy Val.
Hey, kids.
Now, you may remember Val from our first arcade episode, in which we talked a lot about arcades. And if you forgot, he was that little boy who hid in the arcade because he never wanted to leave.
Yeah, I'm starting to think my parents purposely left me there, and the arcade operators just found me, so they had to turn me back in.
It's just like, have you seen the boy? And your parents are like, no, we've never seen him.
And then you're like,
you, sir.
Mom, Dad. Oh, yeah. Sí es de nosotros.
Mamá, papá.
Yeah, I was dressed in a mariachi uniform. What could they say?
So we're finally covering Street Fighter. To give a little bit of history in our group. So the podcast was formerly Los Peleoneros because the group that we have is called Los Peleoneros, which in Spanish is basically the fighters. And part of the reason we came up with that name for the group is because we were joined together through fighting games. Really, one of the main three ways of the fighting game was actually Street Fighter Third Strike, which is why it's appropriate that Frank's wearing that shirt. But just Street Fighter in general is one of the games that unified it was a common interest that we shared that brought our group together. And so it's about time that we actually talk about why it is that we love Street Fighter. And so all of us grew up playing Street Fighter. We still play to this day. We're still super competitive. It is the one fighting game that we play regularly with each other. Even though there's other fighting games we do play, a lot of them we may just drop and play at the moment. But Street Fighter, we never let go. And it doesn't matter which one it is. We find a reason to love it. Sometimes we complain about it at the beginning, right, Frank? Mm-hmm. And then, but then otherwise we go, oh, you know what? Maybe it wasn't as bad as I thought it was. And we'll get into that when we get to these questions. So starting with question number 1. What Street Fighter games are you most familiar with? Really, which ones, bless you, Frank, do you play regularly? And Gino, I'd like you to lead off with this one.
Most familiar with 2. Obviously, I've got this, which I play much every time I can't sleep, which is every day. So play this like every day. Third Strike and 4. I think 4 is incredible. So yeah, those are the 3 that I'm most familiar with, and I play most often.
Is there a particular version of 2 that you play the most? Or
I know people like the more characters, turbo.
I'm not asking about other people. I'm asking you specifically.
I know, but that's what I'm saying is that most people typically enjoy like more fighters, more everything. But I think 2 is actually my vanilla 2 is like my favorite.
Okay,
it's always going to be
8 fighters.
Yeah.
All right, cool.
Yeah.
All right, Frank.
Well, I'd say it depends on the age, because when I started playing, of course, I played Vanilla 2. Out of the iterations of 2, I'd say probably Turbo or Super, regular Super, were really the ones I played the most. When, of course, with 3, it's Third Strike. With 4, it's Ultra. So, as far as most familiar with, I'd probably say Third Strike and Ultra. Yeah. Actually, and then, of course, the Alpha series. I did play Alpha 2 on Super Nintendo, which that port is awful. But when I managed to get a copy of it when Blockbuster was going out of business, I was very happy, so I played the hell out of that one. So I played Street Fighter Alpha 2 the most out of the Alpha series. But
very cool.
Yeah.
All right, and Val, what are you most familiar with?
So I have played so much Street Fighter 2 Champion Edition that I've probably spent more time playing that game than acquiring college credits in my life.
So you have a degree in Street Fighter 2.
Yeah.
Champion
I got that game for the Sega Genesis when I was a teenager. I got it used at Blockbuster, and I played that game so much. Back then, I didn't have a 6-button pad, so the way you had to play with a 3-button is you had your 3 attack buttons, and you would switch between kicks and punches using the start button. And before I had a pad, I actually mastered switching between the kicks and the punches so effortlessly. I didn't even really need the 6-button pad. So I played that game a ton. Like I wouldn't even know how much time I spent. Besides that, I played a lot of Street Fighter Alpha 3 when I lived in Austin with my roommates. My roommate had a PlayStation, and we went down to Game Fellas, and I picked the best Street Fighter game they had. And the guy told me it was that one, so I picked that one, and we got so many hours out of that thing. So I would say those 2.
Okay, so I do want to just side note, really funny story, which Val doesn't remember, but I mean, I wouldn't be making it up. So in 2001, when Val was living in Austin, I actually, on a complete fluke, ran into him when I was walking out of an arcade, and we just were staring at each other for like a good 3 seconds, and then it registered. It's like, hey, I remember you. And I was in town to go see Weezer, and Val, I don't know, he was on his way to work or something, but he's like, wait, you're going to go see Weezer? And I'm like, yeah, and the Get Up Kids are opening. And he's like, what? And he threw his hat on the ground. Like, and he's like, I've never worn a hat in my life, and there's no way that happened, but it's a 100% true story. I mean, we hadn't seen each other for like 2 years, and I just happened to run into him on the streets of Boston, walking out of an arcade.
Wearing a cap.
I think that was that might have been Einstein's. I don't remember, or the one behind the Scientology building.
Yeah. He doesn't remember.
Yeah, it's going to be one of those 2, but yeah, I don't know. I still don't think it happened.
It happened.
Anyway, what about you, Bobby?
Val's in denial. So my Street Fighter 2 Turbo. I played a crap load of Street Fighter 2 Turbo on the Super Nintendo. Fortunately, I had 6 buttons, so I didn't have to worry about hitting any start buttons because it wasn't Genesis. And then long, late nights into the deep mornings with Gino on Third Strike on his MAME arcade cabinet. I had actually not played Third Strike until Gino and I developed our friendship, and I am very thankful that he introduced me to that. And then on my own, Street Fighter 4, when it came out, particularly Super Street Fighter 4, is probably where I really sunk my teeth into it. So those 3 versions of Street Fighter are probably the ones that I've put the most time into, especially 4. I really, really like 4. So, those are my 3. So, starting off with you, Frank, if you can recall, what was the earliest Street Fighter experience you remember? Hopefully your first.
Yes, I do remember. So, in El Paso, there was an old bowling lane called White Elephant Bowling, and it was, I think, on Texas Avenue, kind of close to downtown. I want to say it was 1991. It was either 91 or early 92, but, bowling alleys had nothing but arcades back then. It was amazing. And I remember my parents going off and, my dad was going to bowl in a tournament or something. Well, I go to the arcades and they had about, I want to say maybe 7 or 8 lined up against a wall. Like, it wasn't a proper arcade because they didn't have the room, but I was walking, checking them all out, and all of a sudden I hear, Hadouken and Sonic Boom, and I'm just like, what is that noise, And I go up and I see the attract mode playing for Street Fighter 2, and I was like, whoa, because, I think the only fighting games I had seen before were like, what was it? Karate Champ, and I don't even remember what else. I don't even think I had seen the original Street Fighter at the time, but it was very, very impressive because I saw, the fireballs flying. I saw, Dalsim stretching his limbs and everything like that, and I was just so, flabbergasted. So I went, I got my 4 quarters of my dollar, and the first character I ever picked was Blanca, because I was like, oh, he's a beast, so, he's got to be the best character. And, I didn't know what the hell I was doing, but it was fun. I just remember jumping around, trying to do special moves just by, button mashing, because I don't think I had really played fighting games properly up to that point. So I had seen him do the, his spin move, and I kept trying to do it. I saw a roundhouse, and I was like, well, he must be turning into a ball. And, so I kept hitting it, but yeah, it didn't work.
Man, you were a stupid kid.
Hi, Lisa. Hi, Super Nintendo Chalmers. I'm learning.
I was. There's a lot of stupid stuff I believed. But yeah, that was my first experience, and I will never forget that it was Vanilla Street Fighter 2, and just the graphics. Oh, it was. I fell in love with Street Fighter, at 9 years old or 10 years old, right around that time.
Yeah, it's good. How about you, Val?
Okay, so mine was at Bassett Center. It's a small. It's still around, right? It's called Bassett Place now.
Right.
Everybody calls it Bassett Center still.
Yeah, I still call it Bassett Center. It's Bassett Center. There used to be an arcade just outside of a Sbarro's, right there, and it was a huge arcade. And I actually talked about the arcade in my previous.
In our last arcade episode.
Yes. So they had Street Fighter 2, and nobody was playing it. And my younger sister Ani and I were at the arcade with a couple of quarters in our hand, and I put in the quarter, and I had played Final Fight before, so I knew what a beat 'em up was, and I thought this was a beat 'em up. I had never seen a one-on-one fighter before, so I picked Ryu. Okay, hold on. I'm gonna pause for a minute. How are you supposed to say that name? Because everybody has a different way, and everyone says their way is the correct way. I used to say Ryu, and
that's what I said too.
I've heard Ryu. I don't know what the hell the correct way to say that name is.
I believe it is Ryu, correct?
It's Ryu.
So Ryu. Ryu is the closest.
Right, the closest way you could say it in English.
Okay.
But Ryu is, that's what we grew up calling them. It was like Ryu, because that totally makes sense in
That's
English
what I call
language.
it. All right, so I picked that guy, and my first and only opponent was Chun-Li, the computer control Chun-Li, and I lost the round, and I walked away from the machine. And I came back, and I can still see my character just standing there, and Chun-Li keeps kicking him. I'm like, oh shit, I think I'm still playing. So I jumped on. I started moving the buttons again, and I lost. Either way.
I'm a Star Wars.
So I think we went to another machine. We came back, and there was a little crowd that had built around the machine, and all these kids were playing it, and I started figuring out what it was. And there was this one guy. I don't know what his deal was, but he started lying about the game. He started making up these stupid stories about saying, yeah, I have this game for the PC. And did you know that guy E Honda, that's Chun-Li's dad? And Blanca is actually a woman, and he has a little kid. And I've seen the kid at the end of the game. And like just completely blatant lies, but I had no idea what the hell he was talking about, so I totally believed him. Yeah, none of that's true, by the way, if you don't know what Street Fighter is. But yeah, that's my first encounter with it.
Except for the part where E Honda is Chun-Li's dad. That's
Chun-Li's dad.
true.
One's Chinese, one's Japanese, but somehow they just made it work.
Hey, you know, her mother's Chinese and the dad's Japanese. There's people who are mixed. Come on, man. Have an open mind.
No, not back then.
He was a debugger. That's why he knew secrets that never made it to the final game.
Oh yeah,
right.
It's funny because I wrote this story a long time ago about my first experience with Street Fighter 2 because I'd seen Street Fighter 1, but it didn't really make the impact. I don't think because I was so obsessed with Double Dragon, rightly so. But so yeah, everybody when people write about Street Fighter 2, they always start it with it began with a fist, which is such bullshit because what begins with a fist is when you get knocked out, by this, 5th grade kid and his tiny fist, catches you in the eye, that's what begins with a fist, not, Street Fighter 2. Street Fighter 2 for me began with a long line.
Wait. Are you saying that you got knocked out by a 5th grader?
Hey, I mean, I was in 5th grade too, or whatever it was.
Oh, okay.
But I don't even remember. It was 91, so I would have been in 6th grade. And actually, that actually happened, but that begins with a fist. Playing Street Fighter did not begin with a fist for me. So it's 91, and it had come out. I think it came out in March. I don't think it really. We're pretty late on most everything here. We were in the late 80s, early 90s in the town. So I hadn't seen to that point. I hadn't seen a Street Fighter that was it was 91. And I think we'd gone to the movies. Me and my friend John, we went to go see The Rocketeer for the dollar movies. And we come out. It's a Friday night. Okay, it's a Friday night. And the arcade there at Montwood was Detour arcade. That's no longer there. It's this. Anyway, so. Then we come out, and there is, and I've never seen this again, ever. And you're saying a crowd around the machine, Val, not only was there a crowd around the machine, and this is September 91, I remember, school had just started. So there was a crowd around the machine, but then, to play it, there was literally a line out the door from Detour. So we stood in line to play Street Fighter 2, I would say at least an hour. We were just kind of staring, looking over our shoulder, over people, because we were these little kids, So yeah, I think I was 12. So I get to the front, and I think I played Guile first, which is the worst thing you can do as a beginner because he's not, at least you can get the what is it, the
emotions.
You get the motions a lot easier if you're playing Ryu or somebody else, but Kyle's got all of the, you get hold and push forward, and
he's a charge character.
Yeah, and of course, all these kids are older than I am. whoever's playing me is like older, and of course they wiped the floor with me, and we just waited for like an hour. So to play again, we couldn't because it would have just taken another hour. And I think I went off and I played like Sengoku or something, which is for Neo Geo, which is great. But I mean, that will always, I'll always remember that, and it was just like magic. It really was. And again, I never saw it again. I never saw that amount of, nothing demand in a line, unless you're talking like original Batman in '89 or something like that, where it was like a phenomenon and you could see it happening.
Yeah. Now, to be fair, Gino, I don't think any character you picked would have been a good character to pick, just because it was such a new concept, right? You didn't know what a quarter circle forward was, or charging back and forward with an attack button. Those things just were completely alien, I think, to most people. Whereas nowadays, you jump on a fighting game, and most likely, if you do one of those moves, you're going to pull off a special attack, right? Just because that's just the formula that Street Fighter kind of built.
It's become the standard.
Right.
Yeah. The only other time, well, for 2, I remember seeing a lot of people around it, but still, I had mentioned in the arcade episode is that the biggest crowd I had ever seen was when MK1 had come out, and at Bolo Paso, I literally couldn't even see the arcade cabinet because there was so many people, and I was like 4 foot and nothing, so that didn't help.
Yeah, I mean, I'd never, and I would imagine that Mortal Kombat and Street Fighter 2, when they probably vying for place, both very important,
Well, you know what? One thing, and I mean, we can kind of get into this a little more later on, but Street Fighter definitely has a longer lasting legacy. I mean, because Mortal Kombat, I think it drew so much attention because of the controversy, and it had the digitized graphics and it had the fatalities. But if you compare the two as fighters, like obviously Street Fighter 2 holds up way better than the first MK.
Yep, I agree.
What about you, Bobby?
So, we talked about boomerangs last time when we had the arcade podcast. And so Boomerangs is a place where there's a movie theater where I first saw Street Fighter 2, but I didn't play it there. My first experience playing Street Fighter 2 was actually at Western Playland. If you guys remember Western Playland, when it was at
Delta or whatever.
Yeah, but that's the name of the park. Scottico Park.
Yeah.
They had a nice arcade there by the Ferris wheel, and or across from the bumper cars. And I remember going into that arcade, and it was just a friend of mine. The arcade was pretty empty because everyone was out riding the rides. It was like a school field trip, and there was Street Fighter 2, and I'm pretty sure it was Champion Edition. So I did play vanilla Street Fighter at that time. So my first experience playing Street Fighter was Champion Edition, and like Gino, my first character I selected was Guile because he had the American flag on his arm. So hell yeah, I'm gonna go with the American dude, right?
I think Val just orgasmed a little when he said that your first experience was Champion Edition.
That's why he went quiet.
Yeah,
you're supposed to bring a sock with you to these podcasts.
I'm all out.
Oh god,
it's the weekend, man.
Yeah, I get it. So so of course Guile was the first guy I played, and I remember. It was like the second round, and my friend had won the first round, and he was attacking me, and I was holding back, and then I was trying to do a forward punch, and Guile threw a sonic boom, and then we both just like stopped. We both just let go of our joysticks, and we're just like, "What the fuck was that? What did you do?" I was like, "I don't know. I'm just trying to win here." He's like, "Do it again." Of course, we couldn't figure it out the rest. We spent the whole rest of the match. I think we ran out of time in the second round, and I ended up winning because I had more health. And then he won in the third round. But yeah, we couldn't figure out how to do the sonic boom. And I think he was playing. Yeah, he was playing Ken, and he was able to do Hadoukens, but that was it. He didn't know how to do anything else. But yeah, that was my first experience. But I still remember that shock of throwing a sonic boom and being like, how the hell did I do that? And then the frustration of not being able to replicate that move. So
I think my first was also Hadouken, Bobby. So I can totally relate.
All right. So moving on to personal taste. what version of Street Fighter is your personal favorite? And be specific. Don't just say 4 or 2, but which version of each of those games it was your favorite. And we'll start with Val, which we already know.
Yeah, it's Champion Edition. It's like I said, it's the one I played the most. I know a lot of people like Hyper Fighting better. I personally don't. I think it depends on the setting of the machine, but sometimes it could just be too fast. I don't like some of the changes in the move sets. I don't like the change in the color palettes that the characters are given. So for me, it'd always be Champion Edition. It's a lot of nostalgia, but also it's the one that I feel like I got the best at when I was actually playing it. So that's my vote.
Yeah, and I totally understand why. How about you, Gino? Oh, go ahead, Frank.
No, I was just gonna ask. And with Champion Edition on the Genesis, wasn't it like tweaked? It wasn't proper Champion Edition. Like it was a special version or whatever.
So on the Genesis, you got Vanilla Champion Edition, and then you also got Hyper Fighting in the same cart. So if you played Champion Edition, it was the same speed as the standard Champion Edition for the arcade, but with Hyper Fighting, you could adjust the speed if you set it to that mode.
Okay, yeah, because I never had a Genesis, and I remember always seeing the cart, and it said, what was it Special Champion Edition? What was the...
Hold on. I have it right here. I think it was Special Champion Edition.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah, something like that. And you know what? I'm going to correct myself. I think Champion Edition on that cart had 4 speed settings, whereas Hyper Fighting had 8.
Oh.
I don't know. I think Gino can correct me on that.
No, I think you're right.
Okay.
All I know is Street Fighter 2 Turbo on Super Nintendo had 10 speed settings.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, but what about the blast processing? Did you have that?
We didn't need it. We had a mode 7. We had mode 7. You didn't get to see the arenas rotate in my imagination.
Well, you got me there.
Yeah, you know what? One thing I will say about that Champion Edition on Genesis is that's actually some of my favorite box art for Street Fighter 2.
Oh, with Guile.
Getting scissor kicked by Bison.
No, it's actually it's Bison or Vega, depending on where you're listening to this podcast from. But yeah, he's hitting Guile who's throwing a sonic boom, right?
Yeah. Well, yeah, you see it like coming out of his fist, but he doesn't actually throw it because I think, if I'm not mistaken, he's getting scissor kicked.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, and I'm actually glad you brought up the or Vega part. So it's just to clear up any confusion. It's not that the box art was different. Is that there are 3 bosses in the game that have whose names changed when it came across, or basically when the game left Japan. So originally, so here in North America, we have M. Bison as one of the main bosses. We have Balrog, who's the boxer, and we have Vega, who's the guy with the mask and the claw. But in Japan, what ended up happening was M. Bison was the name of the boxer because he was basically a mock-up of Mike Tyson. But because Capcom was worried about lawsuits from Mike when it came over here to the States, they decided to switch the names over. So the M. Bison was switched over to the character named Vega, which was the main villain, who became M. Bison. And then Vega was moved over to the Balrog, which is the guy with the claws, and then the Balrog was shifted over. So they just did that 3-way rotation. So in case you weren't aware, if you ever go to Japan, they have the name. And then Frank, if you could remind us, what are the names that they use for them in tournaments?
So just to, eliminate the confusion, Bison here in the States, the main boss, he's known as Dictator. The boxer is known as Boxer, and Vega is known as Claw. So they'll call him that, Dictator, Boxer, or Claw, just to give him that generic description so it's easier to distinguish between them.
Yeah. And then, Gino, your personal fave.
You mean wait? What was the question again?
Oh, just your favorite version of Street Fighter.
That's tough. I don't think I could nail it down. I think
maybe a couple. What would you consider the ones that you always go back to?
I mean, obviously 2. obviously 2 and 3. 3, I mean, I could write about 3.
What?
I mean,
Vanilla 2? Is that what you're talking about?
No, I'm talking about 3.
No, but you said 2 and 3, but he's at like which version of 2 and 3?
Oh, Vanilla 2, Third Strike. But I want to bring some attention to 4 because 4 is very special to me, particularly because not only because at that point we'd had I don't know how many years of Street Fighter, but I think me and Bobby initially I'd come home from Boston, it was like 2005. Then I met Bobby I think in 2007. So I'd been playing Street Fighter forever before that. I'd been playing by myself because the people I was living with, they liked Mortal Kombat and they never wanted to play Street Fighter, so I would just have to play by myself. So I was playing before I met Bobby, but then I met Bobby, and we kind of just we both realized very quickly that both of us liked to play Street Fighter and that we always played by ourselves. Mm-hmm. So we started playing, and then 4 came along, and I'll never forget it either. Like, I was turning 30, first night I played Street Fighter 4, and I was in Austin, and I was with my sister, and we're twins, so we had the same birthday. So I dragged her, because I hadn't played it, and I knew it was at an arcade. This is like 2009, so I dragged her to the arcade. She stood there, like, happily enough, because she was going to let me do it. But I remember playing that and just being overjoyed. I mean, she like, I'll let you play a few games, but I made her stay for like, I think an hour, and I just sat in that chair playing for, and it was a revelation, man. And then after that, I mean, we spent and still spend time with 4 much every time we get together. So I really want to call attention to Vanilla 4. I mean, it's obviously better in the other iterations, but Vanilla 4 was just incredible.
Yeah, and I'm gonna jump in here and give mine because since Gino brought up 4, Super 4 is my favorite. It's probably the one that I spent the most time in. But I remember when Gino got 4, I immediately went out and bought it for the 360, the Xbox 360 of all systems, because 1, that's the system I had at the time, but I was willing to play it on that system and use the shitty D-pad that I had on there in order to play that game. But it was such an incredible experience because, again, I missed out on Third Strike or just Street Fighter 3 in general. That I remember seeing it in arcades, but I never touched it. I was in college. There weren't a lot of people that I went to school with that were into arcades. And then, of course, I was in college in West Virginia, so there weren't really arcades out there. It's just, kind of in the middle of nowhere. And so really, I didn't really get back into Street Fighter until I started hanging out with Gino, and we would play Third Strike. But really, the thing that kept me going was 4 because the characters, my favorite characters from 2 were all coming back. You had Sagat, you had Bison, you had E Honda, especially Frank and Gino know E Honda, Zangief. Those are probably my 2 mains from all the games, with the exception of Chun-Li in Third Strike, because she's probably the only one I feel the most comfortable with her, and Sean, but Sean's not really that great. And but with 4, they brought back all those characters, but then they brought them back in a style with that the 3-dimensional art style in a 2D plane. It was beautiful. The music was incredible. I mean, it was just an experience. It was like a rebirth of my love of Street Fighter in that game, and Super Street Fighter is the one that solidified it, because it took some of the things that were missing or that were improperly done with the vanilla Street Fighter 4 and just improved them. Plus, it included the biggest roster at that point of any Street Fighter game. So, yeah, Street Fighter 4 Super is my favorite.
Awesome.
How about you, Frank?
I think it's pretty obvious what my favorite is. And the reason, so this is really where we bonded, was Third Strike. Bobby did say it at the beginning, but it's the first time that I really put effort into getting good at a fighting game, because I played fighting games from 91 up to 2011, which is when we really started hanging out, and I was always decent, like I would figure out combos and stuff, but I really hadn't used strategy when playing fighting games up to that point. And I know you guys may give him a hard time, but I actually credit Manny for challenging me to actually get better because, when it came to matches, like I would win a little more, but, overall we were pretty evenly matched. But then I remember when I played Manny for the first time, like he kicked my ass and I was like not used to that. I mean, not from somebody that I was just hanging out with casually. Like if I had played at the arcade, yeah, there was always going to be people better than me. But, he kicked my ass like almost every single time. And I was like, you know what? I really want to practice so I can get better. And I spent so much time with Third Strike that I got at least marginally good with every single character minus Q minus 12 because I hate 12. He's so boring to play. But I fell in love with it by really just diving in and making sure that I got good at it. Not just good, but strategy and learning footsies and learning all the mechanics of that game because out of all of them, the Third Strike is probably the one with the most depth, but it's also got a pretty good, easy pick up and play kind of feel to it. And Bobby kind of alluded to it earlier. 4 in general, I didn't warm up to for a while, and I think it's because I didn't really play it when it first came out. I did buy it for 360, but it just took me I'd say honestly 2 years because even when hang out, I'd be like, all right, I guess we'll play 4 instead of Third Strike. So I play 4 more now as opposed to Third Strike, but I'd say Third Strike is still my favorite by far. And then I would say Ultra 4 just because it does have the full roster and It's the most balanced. But it did take me a while to warm up to 4, but yeah, I play 4 more now because, in my opinion, I think that's actually the best Street Fighter game. So,
yeah, I'm glad you I'm glad you brought up Manny because it was the same thing for Gino and I. When Gino, I, and Manny would always hang out, like we would get together as often as we could on the weekend, and I mean, dude, we'd be up till 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning playing Street Fighter. Mostly Third Strike. Of course, we play vanilla Street Fighter, or we'd play Marvel vs. Capcom, or we'd do Samurai Showdown 4 specifically. And then it was also during that time where we discovered SVC Chaos. Gino knew about it. I had never heard about it, and but he introduced it to me, and we fell in love with that. But Manny was so good at Third Strike compared to Gino and I that he and I worked so hard. And at the time, the only version of Third Strike available on home console that I can think of was the collection on PS2. Yeah, the anniversary collection on PS2. And I bought a copy of that just so I could learn Third Strike better so I could beat Manny. And because, it was funny because Manny would occasionally bring out Akuma just to show how good he was. Mm-hmm. And then he started bringing out Akuma because we started catching up to him with his other characters. And then eventually we got to the point where we were even with his Akuma, where his Akuma was no longer the master of disaster. And we figured out how to exploit that. So I remember the first tournament or two that we hung out at. There were times where that tournament, like it always came down to Manny and somebody else, but I was usually up there and Frank was usually up there. But I still remember that first tournament we had at Rob's house. And Manny and I were having a match as a Akuma and Chun-Li. I was Chun-Li and he was Akuma. And I still remember the excitement Frank had on his face after the match was over, after Manny won, because it's such a close match. And Frank was so enthusiastic. Like, that was such an incredible match. It was great. And we had played SVC Chaos that night, too, on the Xbox that you had brought. And, man, it was so great, that tournament, that I'm so glad it brought us together, because that kind of excitement was is something you just, you don't just get from sitting down and playing a game by yourself. And we sometimes we talk shit about Manny. He's never been on our podcast, and sometimes we just give him shit. But we love Manny. He's such a competitive guy when it comes to those games. He's always been like that. And you know what? Yeah.
I'll give him credit is that he is he's a very humble, like, winner and loser. Like, he doesn't. Oh, yeah. He's not a piece of shit like me. Like, I get mad and you know, and if I win, I rub it in Gino's face, you know.
Yeah, I'll give Manny credit that he'll wipe the floor with you, but he'll still tell you, "Oh man, that was a pretty close game." Yeah,
Yeah, he's all nice about it.
yeah, just total bullshit. But
Favorite, so, not to go off topic, but I remember my favorite because Frank and I have a pretty contentious when we play together. It's usually stressful on my part, not for him, sure. But, I remember I came back from Austin after having played Cody. I just decided, I was like, Cody's, that's it. I'm just focusing on Cody. Because I played this guy in the arcade, and we went for a couple rounds. He's like, you're pretty good. He said, but stop picking different characters. He's like, because you're only marginally good with you're not as good. So he said, pick one and just run with it. So I did. So I spent weeks. I was in Austin for a couple weeks. I had 3 weeks maybe. And all I did day in, day out was play Cody. And I came home. We were hanging out, I guess, for like an afternoon or something. And I'll never forget it. I beat Frank like 5 times in a row as Cody. I mean, not just beat him. I wiped the floor with him. Mm-hmm. Then of course, subsequently, it never happened again. But that afternoon, it was like so glorious because I said, wow, this is what I needed to do the whole time, is just pick someone and run with it, you know?
You know, and I remember that too because that was, I think we were hanging out at my place, right? It was like when I was staying with my parents. And I remember getting frustrated because, I mean, Gino beat the shit out of me. And, you know, it was kind of like when I first had that encounter with Manny, but I was like, damn, Gino got really good. And I mean, even so, like, we'll play matches every once in a while, and I mean, your Cody's still pretty good. Like, I'd say, considering how much I've played more than you, even lately, like, you're not really rusty at all.
Yeah, he's like my first love now. So like, always, whenever there's a Cody, I'm gonna play Cody. So.
Oh, and Val dressed up as Cody when we did our Street Fighter night.
Yeah.
Street Fighter on Halloween.
Forgot about that.
That was a great costume.
So we definitely got to get the picture to Mike B so that he can put it up.
So you can put it here in this podcast. Yeah, Val was Cody, Frank was Ryu or Ryu, and Gino was Remy, which we'll be talking about a little bit later. And then my costume was Q from Third Strike. So
and that was great Q, man.
Dude, I worked really hard on that one. So it's probably the most fun costume I've done. All right, so let's get back on track. So just a general question to the three of you guys. Do you prefer arcade controls or a control pad, and why? Feel free to jump in.
No, I'll let Val.
Okay. So for me, when I heard that Street Fighter 2 was going to come to the Super Nintendo back in the 90s, I thought, how in the hell are you going to play this game with a gamepad? Like, I didn't understand the concept of playing a game that you play with a joystick and big buttons at home with a little D-pad. So to this day, I still prefer the joystick for fighting games. However, I don't like having to dig out my big X-Arcade. Yeah, to plug it in to play those games. So I prefer the convenience of a gamepad. But if you were to twist my arm, I'm going to tell you it's going to be the joystick.
I'd have to twist your arm like we'd be at your house and let's play Street Fighter. Well, I've got some pads. He's like, no. Like, no, let's play on joystick.
Yeah, give me a half Nelson and make me decide which.
So who agrees with Val?
Oh, absolutely.
I'd rather play on the arcade, but I'm way better with the pad just because of the time put in. But because even just practicing combos and stuff, like I can get them down, but that rust sets in as soon as I take a break. Whereas on a pad, it's just so familiar, and I can warm back up into it like within a round. But especially playing with you guys, I'd rather play on the arcade just because it's just the better experience.
It is. I think I think this last generation, I think when 4 came out, actually, that day I remember, God, that was an expensive launch. I had bought, 2 of those, not the super high-end joysticks or the arcade sticks, but like just the lower tier, which were fine. They were great. So I bought 2 of those, and then subsequently over the next 10 years, I bought I don't know how many joysticks, arcade joysticks, like and I've got I don't know how many now, and they're great though. I love to bring them out and like switch them out every once in a while. So I really, really do prefer it. I wouldn't say like proficiency is great because just like Frank, if you're working on it for a while, yeah, you start getting it. But the minute you put it away, it's like fuck, it's starting from zero. Not zero, but really close.
Yeah, so I am in. I don't want to say disagreement with you guys, but my preference is to use control pad. But one, I mean, that's what I always played Street Fighter on. I very rarely got to play in the arcade, so my handling on joysticks was very small. And then like if I'm gonna play on a joystick, I would prefer to have something that feels stable. See, a lot of times they'll sell those joysticks for your consoles, and you can sit them in your lap, but to me they don't feel heavy, and so when I end up moving, the whole thing shifts, and I feel like I don't have full control of the system, as opposed to like a full arcade or like the one Val has at X Arcade, because it's a full size joystick and it's heavy. So when you put it on a table, it stays in place. It's not something you put in your lap. So unless I have that going for me, I really do prefer a joypad, the control pad. But it also depends on the character too, because there are some characters that I play better with on a joystick than I do in the control pad. Control pad, I generally do better with the charge characters and like a Zangief where you have to do 360s. Where on the with characters like Ryu, the what do you call them? What's the name for those characters that use the quarter circle moves? The
Shotokans.
Well, just regular inputs like let me look up the term while you're.
Well, those characters, that use the quarter circles, half circles in order to do their move sets, those guys I have an easier time pulling off moves with on a joystick. So it depends on the character and it depends on the situation. So generally I prefer control pad, but I think part of it is just because that's what I'm used to.
Yeah, but you know what? It seems, because I remember like one of the last times that we played, you managed to do better pulling off moves like for charge characters on the arcade stick when we were playing Ultra 4.
Yeah, and that's been able to improve a lot, and it's just because I've been able to put more time. Unfortunately, I don't own my own arcade stick, which I'd like to one of these days, but they're not exactly cheap, because I wouldn't want to get just the in-lap ones. I'd want to invest in something that's has that's good and sturdy, but then that means it's has high dollar value.
Yeah.
So since we're talking about control pads, the other question I had for you guys was, did any of you play the original Street Fighter with the pressure pads? Now, for those of you who don't know, the original Street Fighter didn't originally have joysticks. It was originally designed with these pressure pads where how hard you press them determined the strength of the attack. So, you had your light, medium, hard, and then how hard you press it determined how hard your attack was. If any of you guys played any of those early boxing games from the 80s, some of those boxing games had that. But any of you guys, I know I never did. I never even saw an arcade that was like that. I've only heard about it or seen pictures. But what about you guys?
No, I never had an experience like that. I don't even remember seeing it in the arcade out in the wild, because the only time I had seen the original Street Fighter or Fighting Street, depending on which version you're playing, was at Pizza Hut. They had a multi-arcade. Like it was kind of like a main machine, but I don't remember the exact name of it. But I remember it was black, and it had, I don't remember what the front end like program was, but it did have a list of all the arcades, and that was the first time I had ever seen Street Fighter, the first one. So
I think it was called Ultracade.
Yes, Ultracade.
Oh yeah.
So for me, I've never seen the pressure button version. I actually didn't even know it. I actually thought that was kind of an internet rumor that someone just made up online once. I actually did play the first Street Fighter back at this arcade. Well, it's not arcade. It was a roller rink called Roller King here in town.
Oh yeah.
And they always had these really weird games. They had that at one point. They had Michael
World
Jackson.
Heroes.
Yeah, they had World Heroes. Oh God. They had Moonwalker, Michael Jackson's Moonwalker. They had Magic Sword. They had all these games that I'd never seen again in an arcade, but they were always there. They were just these oddball machines. But they had an original Street Fighter. I played it a few times, and it was actually I played it right after I played Street Fighter 2 for the very first time. So yeah, it was strange. I think I actually got all the way to Mike Bison in that version just by mashing buttons. I didn't know how to do a Hadouken or a Shoryuken because it's pretty much impossible to do those moves in that version of the game.
Yeah, and I think actually he was just called Mike in that version.
Yeah, he was just
That's
Mike.
right. I just remember it was Mount Rushmore, and he kicked my ass.
Yeah.
Oh, but you did download the Street Fighter 1 remake, right, on PC?
I did, and it's actually really good. It's way more playable than the original version, and does it have online capability? I don't remember.
I don't know.
I don't know.
Okay, but yeah, it actually plays fairly nice, and I think it's free, right? It's just somebody just kind of put it together. Yeah.
It's funny that you mentioned Roller King again. Not to go off topic, but last thing, I think right before they went out of business, so we'd been going there forever because it was just I don't know how me and Manny and like Henry would end up at Roller King, but we would. And like I think the last year that they were there, they had, and it was the saddest thing. It was like a graveyard. It was like had Aliens, the arcade.
Oh,
it wasn't working, but but it had the marquee and all the side art and everything, and like it was dead. It was the saddest thing in the world. I just thought I would pay tribute if you were going to mention Roller King.
Well, it's funny how Val says he saw all those arcades at Roller King and never anywhere else. And, you know, like I always go back to Boomerangs because that's probably where I got the best arcade experience. And I remember they had Moonwalker there, and they did have Street Fighter there for a while, but they had brought it in. I remember them bringing it in after they had already brought in Street Fighter 2, so no one played it. I never even played it because, like, why? Street Fighter 2 was there. And I remember that's where I saw all these arcades that you know we always talk about, but I didn't always get a chance to play them just because of time constraints or, you know, lack of funds. So yeah, they were there. They were not just at Roller King, Val. They were elsewhere.
Yeah, I didn't go to Boomerangs till I think 93, 94 when MK2
Okay.
was popular. So yeah.
All right. So anything else to add on this one, or are we ready for the next question?
Actually, did you answer that question, Bobby?
Well, yeah, I said I'd never seen one. I only heard about it online, and so yeah, I'd never seen one in the wild. Okay, so now we get into the nitty gritty. Who is your favorite character and why? And if you'd like, I would like you guys to go over an overall for all the games, but if you want to be more game specific, that's cool because I know sometimes we have favorites in specific games. But anyway, Val, start us off.
So for Street Fighter 2, I would still say Vega. It's the character I mastered back when the game was still popular. I was actually coached in an arcade. It was a Pistol Pete's Pizza arcade, and there was this guy I was playing, and he was kicking my ass with Vega, and I was trying to play as Vega. And he was nice enough to actually coach me on how to do the moves and strategy and stuff. So with that, I actually got pretty good with him up until the last Street Fighter 2 iteration. With Street Fighter 4, I actually really liked Zangief. I just thought he was just a fun character to use, especially if you had a proper joystick. Those 3-motion attacks were pretty easy to pull off. For Street Fighter Alpha, I really liked Akuma and Evil Ryu. I don't know why they were just like way overpowered and they're just fun characters to play. But overall, I guess as a series, I would say Chun-Li is my favorite character. She's quick. She's just an easy character to use. Her attacks are just her attacks aren't too powerful, but they chip away enough damage quick enough to usually throw off novice players.
Well, her attacks, even her regular attacks, are overwhelmingly good in Third Strike.
And Third Strike, yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, if I play Third Strike, I usually pick Chun-Li. I'm not very good at Third Strike, but I'll usually just go with her.
That's incredible though, because your Vega lives up to the hype. I mean, we would talk about it as a group, and I don't think at one point, I hadn't seen it, Then I actually saw you do the stuff, and your Vega is the best Vega I think I still have ever seen, and playing in arcades in Austin and all that, where they do like the Ranbats and all that BS, your Vega's still like bar none, really. So I'm surprised that you would say Chun-Li.
Yeah. So apparently I peaked in 1992 with my Vega.
Well, I think
all downhill.
Yeah.
if anything, I think the reason Val says Chun-Li is because she's been in way more Street Fighter games than Vega has.
Yeah, I guess so, but I mean, you have to see Val play Vega. So
I've seen Val play Vega.
Yeah, but it's got to be Champion Edition Vega because they change him up in Super Street Fighter 2.
Right.
It's a completely different character, so I totally suck at Vega in that version. And
that's okay.
Yeah, so that it's funny that you say that because it was the same thing for me. So first of all, Third Strike, my favorite character is Chun-Li, and I mean she's easy to use, she's quick, she's got a very wide range of attacks in her moveset that can, she's anti-air, she's anti-ground, she's anti-everything. And I mean, you can either go on the defense or you can attack with her. She's a very well-balanced character. And but aside from her, overall, my favorite, my go-to character is probably E Honda. Zangief is second generally, but I thought we lost Gino. But E Honda is probably my number one. Now, I'm probably not as good with him in Street Fighter 2 as I am with like a Guile or with Chun-Li, but I still prefer playing E Honda, especially in Super, because that's where they add his up-down attack where he can fly at you. His I forget what the move is called. But in 4 in particular, they really did him justice with his attacks, especially with that grab that he has. And of course his 100-hand slap, which if you do it right can be very effective because it can really put people on the defense, and it gives you an opportunity to find openings and throw them off. So yeah, I gotta give it up for Honda. And then just in general, his character is so goddamn silly. Where he's this sumo wrestler who's looking for the perfect answer to Chanko stew, which is. Chanko is like, I don't even know how to describe it. Like, if my wife were here, I'd ask her about it, but I know it's a sumo wrestling related thing. And, but he's just a great character. He makes me laugh, and I think he's entertaining as hell. And I love his moveset. And I probably play him the most. And like I said, Zangief is definitely a very close second, but really because of 4 and 5. Particularly 4, I learned how to play him really well, and then he's really good in 5. 2, I don't like using Zangief. To me, he's too slow, and I have too much of a difficult time pulling off his 360 moves. But 4 and 5 is where I really like Zangief. So those are mine.
I would say Zangief didn't get good until the Versus series, like X-Men versus Street Fighter or Marvel versus Street Fighter. That's where he actually gets really useful.
Yeah. But then I think a lot of those characters are designed to be more ease of use to play than in the standard Street Fighter games.
Yep, I agree.
How about you, Frank?
Okay, so you guys know I play the crap out of it, like a lot of versions of Street Fighter. In the original Street Fighter 2, I'd say I'm actually a Shoto guy, mostly Ken, just because it's actually my least favorite to play now, just about any version of 2, because either it's too slow or it's too fast. And I definitely can't play it on my own because the AI, I actually don't like playing the AI in older fighting games because it's just, you got to figure out a pattern or you just got to cheese it. And to me, that there's no strategy to that. It's just boring. So I'd say, Ken, definitely in 2. And 3, Dudley, absolutely. He's the first character that I got really good with, but that whole cast overall I really love. I'd say second and third strike would probably be Q. And actually I took inspiration from Bobby because I really liked the way Bobby played his Q. He was really good about footsies. I'd say that was probably your biggest strength with Q, is just it was so hard to get in and punish you, and even if I did get in, I usually got my ass thrown. So but and then in 4, it's kind of a toss-up between Evil Ryu is my best character, but I think the most fun to play for me is actually Sakura, or Sakura, if you want to say it properly. But 4, there's quite a few characters that are fun to play, but Evil Ryu is absolutely my best, another Shoto character. And then in 5, my criticism of 5, of course, is that it's really hard to get good with multiple characters compared to every other Street Fighter. So my best 2 characters are Balrog and Bison, which are both charge characters. And that's really the only Street Fighter where I'm only focusing on charge characters. And to answer your earlier question, the other ones are motion-based. They're just motion characters.
No, but you said it earlier when you call them Shoto characters.
Well, Shoto is, because Shoto is more referring to the standard of a fireball and a DP with their moveset, and not all characters have that. You know what I mean? So.
But that's the term I was looking for, because that's the characters I was referring to when I was trying to remember the word earlier.
Yeah, Shoto, Shotos, Ken and Ryu and every single gamer considers Shotos. Like a pseudo Shoto would be like Sagat, and some people consider Sean in Third Strike, or even in 3, but I don't necessarily agree with that, just because he doesn't have a fireball. He does have a DP, but a DP alone I don't think would make a Shoto character. But that's a whole other conversation. So, yeah. Oh, in the Alpha series, I played Akuma a lot just because that was where he first became regularly playable. And, I thought, he was a badass. He had an air fireball and he was really strong and everything. So, yeah.
All right, Gino.
Question: the characters favorite
characters, dude.
2, not too interesting. Probably like a Ken or Guile, one of the 2. Like Guile because he's still a lot of fun to play. Obviously Ken is fun, but Guile's more fun to pull moves off and stuff. 3, I would say. Hold on a minute. Yeah. Here. Just gonna play Remy again. So, I think Remy. Actually, Remy's a sleeper. For 3, I've been playing that forever. And I don't know. One day, I just decided to try Remy. That just took. And that's been I've probably been playing him just pretty much exclusively for, I don't know, years. So
I remember you playing Dudley a lot, and then splitting your time between the 2, and then eventually, is Remy all the time?
Yeah, Dudley. I love Dudley. I love that character. I loved playing him, and I always go back. But yeah, Remy is just the thing I want, because you can just, as long as you kind of know what you're doing. That goes with everything, but as long as you kind of know what you're doing, you can really stay alive. Even though Remy's really underpowered and easy to, he can't really take a hit. He's a lot of fun, and it's funny. I had a party with some of the guys I work with at GameStop, and we did all night fighting games a couple months ago before this whole thing went down, and they're like, we really want to play Third Strike. We really want to play in Third Strike, so. It was about an hour of me just killing them all with Remy over and over and over until they couldn't. I don't think any one of them won a match. So it's served me well.
Did Remy ever show up? Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Gino.
Oh, go ahead.
No, I was gonna ask, did Remy ever show up in any other game besides Street Fighter 3?
No.
Okay.
It was his only appearance.
Um,
I think
yeah.
that's the only charge character that you pretty much play in any game, right? Because I mean, you play Guile, but you don't like play Guile like you play Remy.
Yeah, no, he's the only one that I really spend time and have spent time kind of, getting to know really well. But yeah, him and Third Strike. 4, obviously Cody and Fei Long, pretty much exclusively. I mean, it's a lot of fun to dabble. That's the problem with 4. Is that it's a lot of fun to dabble with all those characters and get kind of to a level of proficiency and have, but yeah, for me now it's like, no, now it's just perfect who it is that you want to play. And then 5, I mean, 5 is, for me, it's not necessarily a dumpster fire. It's not, I mean, it's really gotten a lot better. Obviously, I'm playing Cody. So, yeah, I would say that's it. There's Alpha 3. Wherever there's a Cody, I'll play Cody. So, for me.
Gino has a soft spot for Cody.
He does. You know why?
Why
I think so?
Fight.
Is because of Final Fight. Which I totally agree with him on, because, we had talked about at length Final Fight and how most of us really love that game to death, so I can understand.
Yeah, that's why I was excited when Hagar was in Marvel vs. Capcom 3, because he was my favorite Final Fight character.
Mm.
So, all right, so I put in this question in here specifically for Gino. What is your opinion on the music of Street Fighter? So, Gino, you want to start us off on this one?
You mean 2 or all across the series?
Just across the series. Just in general, what's your opinion on the music?
Actually, I really love it, man. There's 2 particularly. She's prolific as all hell. I forget her name. The composer who did all of 2. I mean, there's a great video. It's I think it's like a Red Bull music series on YouTube, and they do just talk about video game music. And she talks about some of the creation of this stuff, and it's incredible just to listen to her and just the stuff she came up with. It's so iconic, But yeah, so 2 obviously. I really love 3. I love that music because it's just so just hits what you want it to. I really and Alpha and Third Strike are like incredible. And 4, the great thing behind 4 is that I hope, and I'm getting this right, I'm pretty sure I am. It's one guy. Did, I'm sure with the help of some others. I think 5, he kind of expanded his group of musicians or composers. But at 4, he did all the iterations of 4. He did all the iterations of Marvel vs. Capcom. He did Street Fighter Cross Tekken, Hideyuki Fukasawa. And that guy, man, he really has hit his stride. I mean, it was great in 4. It was amazing in 4. But 5 hit this whole new high mark. And it was really terrible because I had gotten the go-ahead to do an interview with him. I sent him the interview, and we were kind of talking back and forth. He said, great, it's going to happen. Capcom just has to sign off on whatever it is. And then communication broke down on his end because I think Capcom decided they didn't want to do it. Even though it was a really tame interview, it was like, let's talk about whatever. But so yeah, that was a bummer. But it's great. I love it.
Do you have a particular soundtrack that you prefer, that you would listen to more than any other?
I think Third Strike gets the most play because I think it's easy. It moves very easily into your day, So I would say that, or even I would say 5 net, because 5 is just great.
The soundtrack.
I guess he doesn't have a response for that one. Nope. How about you, Frank? Well, it's just because you said 5 is just great, and then Frank made it clear that you were referring to the soundtrack because of your lack of love for 5.
Your estranged relationship with 5.
So, Frank, music.
Well, 2 is my favorite soundtrack, just, because it's so timeless, and, it's the one I've definitely heard the most. I think we actually had a conversation about 4 soundtrack, and how you, Bobby, in particular, those tracks really stand out to you. But
Yeah.
I don't know what it is about 4. There wasn't a whole lot of music. Like, when I hear it, I recognize that it's from 4, but it doesn't stand out to me, and it's not something I can listen to on its own, as opposed to actually listening to Street Fighter 2 on its own. 3 is really good, but it's a little too jazzy for me. I'm not crazy about jazz. It is very, it's still very solid, and I can identify just about any stage or any character because I've also listened to that soundtrack like nonstop. I think 5 is a very, very close contender for best soundtrack because they brought it in a lot of electronic elements, and they really modernized a lot of the classic themes really, really well. And also, there's a lot of standout just stage tracks on there. The Alpha series does have an amazing soundtrack as well. Amazing soundtracks, I should say. But 2, by far, is the one I could listen to on its own. And, especially with all the versions that they have, the covers and everything like that. But my 2 favorite tracks from Street Fighter 2 are Balrog's theme, or Boxer's theme, and Cammy's. Cammy's is actually my top. I love that theme to death.
Yeah. I always talk about 2, 3, and 4 in general because, of course, the original Street Fighter I hardly ever played. Alpha was not something I ever played. Except when I play it with you guys, if we ever bring it up. 5, I haven't played enough to know its soundtrack to make one decision one way or the other. So I totally agree that on 2, where you're coming from, where you can listen to any of those. My preferred soundtracks on there are Ken's theme, and of course Guile's. Those are probably my 2 favorite soundtracks from there. 3 I love particularly because not only does each stage have its own soundtrack, but each round has its own variation. And they do that in 4 too, really, in the sense that round 1 and round 2 change, and then round 3 is just a continuation, is just 2 again. But 3 5 does that. Right, I noticed in 5, just, again, I haven't played it enough to, 5, I'm so caught up in the mechanics that I don't hear the music. But with 4, the music stood out to me immediately. I think because of the timing with the combination of, to me, the amazing graphics at the time that they used to make these very colorful, vibrant backgrounds, these backdrops, they went really well with the character design, and they flowed very beautifully. I think that in 4, the music very much matches the mood of each stage, where it totally makes sense that you could picture a band in the background playing the music in that area because it just blends in so well and makes sense. And I think that's why I like it so much, and that's why 6 with me. And like you said, it's the one that I can definitely throw on and listen to almost every song on that soundtrack and enjoy it without going, I got to skip this. Like with 3, there's specific songs I like and some I'll skip over. With 2, there's some I'm just like, okay, this is great. But 4 is my absolute favorite, and it's just because, to me, when I listen to it, it reminds me of those environments and of those characters, and that's probably why I love it so much. How about you, Val?
I took some notes when you asked these questions, and I wrote, awesome, Ken theme, and then 4 exclamation points after it.
Well said.
Yeah, that Ken theme in Super Street Fighter 2 with the Q sound, if it's one of those big blue arcade machines.
Oh, yeah.
Man, it sounds so awesome.
Yeah, it does.
And I heard a rumor. I don't know if Gino could tell me if this is true or not. So Ken's theme is kind of it kind of sounds a lot like Mighty Wing from Cheap Trick.
You mean Cheap Wings by Mighty Trick?
Yeah, from Top Gun. I heard a rumor that track was written for Guile's theme, and they switched it to Ken so they would avoid some kind of lawsuit from from whoever made Top Gun. Well, whatever studio.
Wow.
Is there any truth to that?
I think I heard the same thing. I'm not sure, but I mean, there's definitely similarities. Yeah, so I wouldn't doubt it. I mean, who knows though? But yeah.
I heard that. I heard that rumor on an AVGN video a few days ago, and I never heard that before. So I was wondering if that's actually true.
Oh, it's like in Double Dragon 2. It's not. There's like the song I think is like Easy Lover with Phil Collins. Of course, it's not actually Easy Lover with Phil Collins on Double Dragon 2, but if you listen closely, match them up very definitely some similarities.
And not to veer off too much from topic, but I mean we have been finding out, especially in the last 10 years, that so many of these Japanese music writers, especially for these early games, heard American music and then tried to replicate it or do like some kind of ode to it. And then there's that, I can't remember his name, but that one particular Japanese writer who literally made songs based off of other American music, and then he got in trouble for it. I just can't remember off the top of my head who he was or what games it was for. But it's no surprise that these games from our youth also sound similar to some of the music from our youth. And it's because those Japanese musicians were influenced by the same music.
Yeah, but like Phil Collins, I mean...
Hey, I like Phil Collins.
He's got some...
Well, I like some Phil Collins. Just whatever Phil Collins that I do like, I really like.
Yeah.
Well, I mean,
man.
And that's even true for American artists, especially in the 90s, because like the student soundtrack is like nothing but heavy metal covers from anywhere from like Pantera to Metallica and Slayer. So some people take inspiration and some people take inspiration.
All right, so big one here. What do you think is the best feature of Street Fighter?
Oh, can I start this one off?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay, so what the best feature of Street Fighter was actually a bug in Street Fighter 2, which everybody knows. If you're familiar with the development of Street Fighter 2, is the combo system, which was actually unintended because they wanted it to be single hit. I think Ono, I don't know if it was him or another programmer, but they didn't like the idea of being able to do combos because they felt it was cheap because, it should be like you're exchanging hits and it should have been more like a chess match, but it was a happy accident and it's actually what popularized it, being able to pull off these, high damage multi-hit combos, and some, especially in like the first one, like Gaio was really infamous for being able to just like mash his jab and link into his medium punch or into a special move, but they really ran with that, with the idea of a combo system, and they refined it and they made it better so much that I think that's actually the defining feature of the Street Fighter series. The back and forth, it's really a chess match among high level players, but when it comes to where we're at as just longtime fans and amateurs, being able to pull off some good combos, the back and forth, it's really fun.
It's very satisfying,
and it is exactly. That's pretty much it. But that's actually one of my biggest detractors from when I was playing when I was younger, because I would go for those really high hitting combos as opposed to the high damage combos. And I really didn't change that until I got to Third Strike.
Right, you're just kind of like in the assumption, I hit you more, should do more damage, when, it doesn't work that way.
Yeah, I just did like a 9-hit combo, and then of course like one spinning pile driver, and I'm like, crap, that's more damage than I did. So I was just going to say, so I think it's the combo system by and far.
Yeah, I can totally see that, because that's a defining characteristic of Street Fighter. I think for me personally, though, and it comes back to why we're in this group, is just the multiplayer. Now, I know with the original Street Fighter, you could play 2 players, But if you were playing Street Fighter the original, you could play as Ryu. And then if you were second player, you could only play as Ken. You couldn't select any of the other characters like Eagle or Rolento or anything else, any of those other characters on the original Street Fighter. So they set up that system in Street Fighter, but they mastered it in Street Fighter 2 by giving you 8 characters to select from. So then you can identify yourself. You could say, this is who I am. This is, I'm He Honda, or I'm this American soldier, or I'm this blonde dude with a red gi who looks like this other guy, and he probably stole my move, so I'm going to kick his ass, And you could make that your character. And it created that idea of both competition, but also created the lore of the series where it allowed us to be competitive and make friends. Because really, I mean, honestly, if I didn't play Street Fighter, I would have different friends right now. Or I wouldn't have any friends. I'd be some lonely guy sitting on my couch right now eating Cheez-Its and crying my life away. But because of Street Fighter fighting games, worst case scenario. But because of Street Fighter, I got to meet you guys. And because we can play that game together, we don't just watch each other play. We get to play against each other and learn from each other. And that little bit of competitiveness has allowed us to develop a friendship. To me, that to me is the defining feature of Street Fighter.
Cool, good answer.
I do want to just add on, the lore itself actually leads to my favorite video game movie, which is Street Fighter 2, the animated movie, which is probably one of the best video game movies ever made. So I do agree with you on that. And actually, that's also my gripe with Street Fighter, is that especially compared to MK9, 10, and 11, they do such a good job of developing those character relationships, and Street Fighter really has fallen short.
They really haven't changed the way they do it, and in some cases it's gone worse. I mean, you can understand back in the day they're limited by the systems that they were building for, but now, I mean, like you said, look at what's the name? NetherRealm Studios has done with Mortal Kombat. I mean, I don't care to play Mortal Kombat 10 or 11, but I like you and I, Frank, have sat down and watched those YouTube videos showing all the storylines of the main game, and that stuff's fascinating. I wish Street Fighter would have something more like that.
Yeah.
Brown, you guys have anything else to add?
Well, you mentioned the storyline in Street Fighter. Did they ever really have storylines besides individual character storylines for Street Fighter 2? Because Shadowloo and all that stuff didn't come into way later in the series. It just seems like they kind of built a story around the characters that they had in the game.
Yeah, I mean, and again, that's kind of the thing where it's very limited for the time, and even with the newer games, they've never really developed it. It's like, here's these characters, here are their backgrounds. And then the through line as far as story has come from things like the comic books or the animes or other media that they've used.
Yeah, and some of the stuff that you have to find out, I've had to read online from the Street Fighter wiki, because who actually won the Street Fighter 2 tournament and who won Street Fighter 3, and I really wish that there was something a little more solid, because I remember when MK2 came out, it literally had the results of the first tournament. They showed Liu Kang winning, explaining the aftermath. Yeah, and with Street Fighter 2, there was some continuity. They did have a lore in mind, because obviously they expanded on the characters from the first game with Ken and Ryu, and then what's it called? When they did the Alpha series, that's when they really started diving into the characters. But there was a story, it just wasn't as popular, or I guess the
defined.
Yeah, exactly. Because they I don't think they cared as much, because they retconned so much stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they did.
Well, that just wasn't really something important back then, right? I mean, the game was made in the early 90s. Nobody cared about a storyline for a fighting game for an arcade. So
I did.
no.
Well, I mean, and that's why I think Frank is right, because that's why Mortal Kombat kept my interest, even though I didn't like to play it as much as Street Fighter. I still enjoyed the lore and I still followed it. And so I think if Street Fighter had that, then I mean, to me, it would just improve the series. But you know, it's not the thing that's gonna, for me, it's not gonna make or break whether I play it or not. It's gonna be the gameplay. But I would like to have more storyline behind those characters. But that's just me. That's just a personal preference.
Yeah. So I was going to add to this question is the variety of the characters and how they're all completely different. So I remember an article I was reading in an old GamePro or EGM back in the 90s with John Tobias and Ed Boon, the creators of Mortal Kombat, and how they designed the game to be where anybody could play any character because the basic moveset for those characters were all completely the same. You could pull an uppercut the same way and a jump kick and a roundhouse, and every character had the same template. Whereas with Street Fighter, every character is completely different from each other, and that's one thing I've always really liked about that series is you can master one character, and it doesn't necessarily help you with any other character on the roster. So it gives you a lot of replayability and a lot of chance to practice and master multiple characters and not really ever really master the game entirely.
Yeah.
Oh, for sure. I mean, it's like with 4 in particular. I mean, I know Frank and Gino will agree that Honda's probably my best character, but they know I play a lot of Zangief. I play a lot of Hakan. I play a lot of well, probably not a lot, but I still play a decent amount of T-Hawk. Guile, and then Dan. So I have a lot of variety in 4. Third Strike, I've tried, you know, I play probably 4 or 5 different characters fairly regularly, even though Chun-Li and Sean are probably the 2 I play the most. And yeah, like you said, Val, it's because of that you want to play these different characters and get different feels for how they are.
Yeah, and another thing too, to add to that is it makes watching the game interesting, right? Because for example, I would never be able to play Dalsim in any usable way, right? But watching a player that's mastered playing as Dalsim is really awesome to watch. Shut up, Frank. Or you know, any other character that you're probably not very good with. Watching a master really utilize that character is really interesting.
I hate Dalsim. Every single game, I hate Dalsim. To me, I hate zoners, and you know, it's just like really high level players. Yeah, like it takes skill to know when to hit a button, but to me, it's so cheap because it's like you're so far away, and you know they're just poking you with like his kicks and his long punches, and it's just cheap, and that's why I don't like it.
But to be fair, you could say the same about any projectile character that could just keep their distance and throw projectiles all day.
And that's why I don't like zoners.
Throwing a lot of words here that people might not know: zoners, footsies.
Okay. So quick rundown. A zoner is somebody who's really good at keeping people away. Normally, they have like extended attacks that hit far, or they can throw projectiles at a speed that makes it hard to close in. Footsies is just the idea of using your normal attacks, staying on the ground, and knowing when to either attack or counterattack when somebody's open. So that's zoning and footsies.
And for the record, I think the best Dalsim character or the best Dalsim in a Street Fighter game is Necro.
Yes, that I will agree because he's not.
He's not full Dalsim.
He's not full Dalsim. Plus, and this is my argument for Third Strike too, is that with the parry system, you can get rid of a lot of that cheap shit.
Yeah. Well, and I think also in Third Strike, they did a really good job of mixing up character types. Like, I don't feel that in Third Strike you can say, oh, this character is specifically a charge character, or this character is specifically a Shoto character. They, you know, like Q, for example, he has charge moves, but he also has other moves that don't require charges. And so I think Third Strike does the best job of mixing that up, so that way you as a player really have to think about how you're going to play as that character. You really have to be able to do different movesets. Like I talked about where I have a hard time with certain moves on control pads. So that's why I have a harder time getting certain moves done in third strike characters. So I have to practice in order to get good with that character in order to take advantage of their full moveset.
Yeah.
Gino, you have anything to add?
I like the saxophone in Third Strike. Very prominent in many of the songs. So much so that I like to. I'm still in the process of creating a Third Strike band that only plays Third Strike music. So and I have my saxophone, so I'm actually actively learning.
But it's not going to be an all saxophone band, right?
God, if I could make it that, it would be amazing. But
so our next question, I think we kind of hit on it, but it was what can be done to improve the Street Fighter experience. We had talked about it with the lore. Did anyone have anything else to add that they would think would make Street Fighter better?
More saxophones in the next soundtrack, please.
All right, more saxophones. So we're going to close out here. Last question of the night. What was it?
Are we still talking about what can it be used to improve Street Fighter?
Yes.
Okay, because I was going to say the netcode. The netcode is one of the biggest drawbacks to playing Street Fighter Online. I mean, from even what was it? The PS2 Anniversary Collection, the Dream. I don't know. I never did the Dreamcast Online. I don't know what that was like, but when I started playing Street Fighter Third Strike Online, that was really my first experience with, online play, and the lag and, just the lack of consistently good netcode, which is the network language that pretty much tells the game how to, read input moves and all this stuff like that. It really is bad. It's always been bad for the Street Fighter series. And I think a lot of it has to do, this is me completely speculating. I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that Asian countries, especially Japan and Korea, they have really good internet compared to us. Right. So they've never really had to develop a really solid netcode. But, here in the States, in the West in general, we don't have it to where it's going to be consistently good. And we really need a good, solid netcode that will allow us to play without having so many online issues. I don't get it how it could be this bad for this long for this many games.
Because, like you said, they don't have a strong team that knows how to do it, and because it works where they're at, they don't look at where it's not, and where the team doesn't know how to improve it. And the other thing too is it's possible that I don't know if it's a Japanese thing or just a company thing that sometimes they don't seek outside help. They instead of hiring a company on the outside to help them solve the issue, they try to handle it in-house by hiring people, but sometimes that doesn't work. You don't hire the right people, or the people who are in place don't have the right information, whatever the case may be. So
I have a question for Frank. So when you say the online experience for Street Fighter's bad, I'm not much of an online gamer. So can you, I guess, tell me what exactly is so bad about it?
It's really mostly the lag, and then also the input delays. It's just really those two things. But in my experiences, even when you have when you set your connection speeds and you're like, everybody has to have this quality of a connection, even with the highest one set, you still have online issues. There's you pull off a move and all of a sudden you got hit and you're like, what the hell just happened? And it's just really frustrating. And these guys, when we've been chatting on Discord and I'm playing 5, that's what I've been playing recently, I'm like, oh, well, look at that. I just lost because of lag. I input this move, but magically it didn't come out. Or, I input it and I got hit before it actually came out. And it's just really, really frustrating.
Yeah.
So is that just something that's never really gotten better, even today?
Nope. I mean, and I have my PS4 hardwired. You know, it's literally not even on Wi-Fi. I can't even say it's Wi-Fi. And you know, I do my speed tests and everything. It's just the netcode itself. Which is actually interesting because this year's Evo is only 4 games, and it's Evo Online, and Street Fighter V was not one of them because the quality of the netcode was not up to.
Is too poor.
Yep.
Oh wow! What did they choose instead?
Oh, it's Mortal Kombat 11, Smash Brothers Melee, I think, Skullgirls.
I don't think they'd be Melee because Melee's
it might
not
be
online.
Ultimate. It might be
It's probably
Ultimate.
Ultimate, yeah.
And then I just had it. Oh, Killer Instinct. And that's because those all have rollback netcode, which makes it easier for, you know, when the systems are communicating, for it to sync up so that, you know, you don't have those lag issues or input issues.
Isn't that kind of sad, though, that Capcom, the company that kind of invented the modern fighting game, can't even get that right, where everybody else, their competitors are basically far ahead of them in that technology?
You know, honestly, I don't think they worry about it too much because the Street Fighter brand and name still sells more than all those other games. And that, you know, because it just has the legacy. So they've never really been pushed to where they have to improve it. And actually, there was a guy who improved it. He did his own patch that improved the netcode, and Capcom actually disabled it with an update.
Wow.
Yeah. So that just kind of tells you the state of their mindset, which sucks. I mean, improve the netcode, and I think with hopefully not being put in for Evo Online, that they'll actually improve it for Street Fighter 6.
Yeah, maybe it's a wake-up call.
Yeah, maybe, but then again, it costs money.
Yeah. Hey, Bobby, I did want to add to this question about how to improve Street Fighter. So there's always this running joke with Street Fighter games that, oh, well, you know, Street Fighter 2 had 6 different versions out available, and then we had Street Fighter Alpha, which had, 3, I think? 3 different
Actually,
well, there's more.
Yeah,
Well,
because... Sorry, go ahead.
No, we're not just going to keep going with Street Fighter 3. You know, you had those
There are 3 versions, yeah.
Street Fighter 4 was the same thing, and Street Fighter 5 is just constant DLC being pushed out. It's that they just keep recycling the same game over and over again, and it seems to be a little. I don't know if it's off-putting for some people, but I remember back even when it was still Street Fighter 2, I thought it was kind of a joke that they just kept repeating the same game over and over again with minimal updates to it.
Yeah, I think, like, to someone who doesn't know Street Fighter very well, it looks like a joke because they only see the changes on the foreground. You know, they see the additional characters, or they see costume changes, or, you know, like Super Street Fighter just added 4 characters, but that wasn't the only thing that changed between.
Oh no, Super Street Fighter Arcade Edition. Because Super Street Fighter was a big upgrade from vanilla Street Fighter 4.
Oh no, I was talking about Street Fighter 2.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah.
Yeah, so like which the original Street Fighter 2, they had the Street Fighter what was it called? But before that was hyper fighting, and then anyway, so they added those 4 new challengers. So cosmetically, it looked like, well, they just added these 4 new characters, but I mean, they added whole new systems where you had the super moves, and then they added new moves for some of the characters. They changed up the timing on some of the combos. They changed up the timing on some of the move sets in the background. So there's all this stuff happening under the hood that changes. One of the big ones that people talk about for Street Fighter 4 Vanilla is Sagat had this really powerful tiger uppercut move that he could do. I can't remember how it was set up. And it made him like a top tier character just because of that one thing, because it gave him a very powerful move. And with Super Street Fighter, they changed that along with other character stuff. And so a lot of those under the hood things are happening that people don't know about unless they're really tracking what's happening with Street Fighter. So yeah, it does seem like a joke initially, because it's like, oh, well, you guys are just releasing the same thing with a few new characters. But a lot of times in reality, there's all these under the hood changes that actually very much change the way the game is played. Sometimes, we hear it, like if you follow tournaments, we hear like, well, this guy plays this character, but now he can't play him very well because they changed this thing, so now he has to switch over to this other character. And it's because of all those under the hood changes that a lot of people just don't hear about because it's not a common knowledge thing.
Yeah, and a lot of that's balancing too, right? You make one character one version has a character that's way too powerful, and they have to kind of balance things out for the next revision. And those changes aren't a bad thing. Those are really good changes. It's just, I was into the series back then, but I could see it from an outsider's perspective how frustrating that must have been to.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Like how they just probably didn't understand why you're buying the same game over and over again. It's the same game, just with, you throw in another couple of characters and some movesets, and is that worth another $60? So,
well, and then it depends on how they handle it too, because like when Super Street Fighter 4 came out, it didn't retail at $60. It was $30 when it came out, or was it 40?
Yeah, I think it was. Well, it was a higher. It was a larger cart. I think for it required more megabytes on the physical cart to hold.
Okay, you're talking about Super Street Fighter 2, yeah, and that's true.
Exactly.
I was talking about Super Street Fighter 4, and so when Super Street Fighter 4 released, it came out at a cheaper price compared to Street Fighter, the vanilla Street Fighter 4. And then you're right, with like Super Street Fighter and Super Street Fighter 2. With Street Fighter 2 Turbo and Super Street Fighter 2, Super Street Fighter 2 on like SNES was like a 32 megabyte cart, where Turbo was a 24 megabyte cart. So they both retailed brand new at $60, I think is what the SNES games were at the time. And so yeah, that I can totally see, which is why I never got Super Street Fighter 2. I didn't care enough about the 4 challengers, and as a kid I didn't know enough about what was happening under the hood to make it worthwhile to get, because I hadn't played those games in the arcade, so it wasn't worth it to me. So I totally get that too, but that's why some people wait until Capcom will release a new Street Fighter game. I kind of like the idea of how they're handling it now, where they'll just release patches and you don't have to worry about buying the game. But what they do and what they are doing now is the season pass stuff with the characters, which is a little controversial because it's like, well, we never had to pay for these additional characters before. Why do we got to pay for them now? And then they do charge a pretty big, hefty price to buy them if you just want to buy them outright. Now, you can unlock them, right, Frank? Or do you still have to pay for it to then make them unlockable?
So there's you can pay for them, or you can earn the fight money. That is still a system that is available in 5, where you just grind out either online or with the story mode or survival mode, and you'll earn that currency, in-game currency. But they've really made it time-consuming to earn them in-game, and it's really more to encourage you to just pay for them.
Just go and pay for them.
Yeah. One thing I didn't like, that's something else that can be improved, is I think that they should make it easier to earn those characters, but it's a money-making model. That's their goal, so it's understandable.
Yeah, but it's been a criticism of Capcom since even Street Fighter 4. When I remember I had bought the PC version, and the extra costumes were actually on disc, but to unlock them, you had to pay an additional cost as DLC, which pissed off a lot of people, and I totally understand why.
Yeah, I totally agree too. Like, especially with games before, you just had to beat the game, and you would earn all these extra costumes.
Right, you just had to grind, right?
Yeah.
Like, and you would eventually be rewarded with these extra colors and costumes and stuff like that.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I agree with it from that standpoint that we grew up with that, and that's kind of what we're used to. What they're doing is they're training the next generation of Street Fighter fans to be used to this concept, so that way they can make more money off of them. I mean, they're not the only company doing it, obviously. Okay, so
I think Gino needed to add some input too, right?
I don't know. I mean, if he wants to.
I said about the saxophones.
I have a feeling that's what he's going to say.
Never mind.
So let's close out on this final question. If you met a newcomer, which Street Fighter game would you recommend they play in order to become immersed in Street Fighter? Anybody go?
So I'm going to be honest and I'm going to sound like an asshole, but if you're just looking to casually play a fighting game, Street Fighter is really not like if you're just going to mess around, like you can play any of them. It doesn't matter. But if you actually want to play because you want to actually learn how to play a fighting game and get good, I would say start with like Third Strike. Because, you know, the cast characters, with the variations between them, you can find your style. Like the original two, it's even all of them, they're just too dated in my opinion, especially if you're barely getting into fighting games now. So I would say Third Strike, but you know, if you just want to play whatever, just honestly it'd be better just to go play like the Versus series because that's way more fun and more rewarding, especially if you're not really trying to be skilled. So
See, I'm of the mindset where if someone new had never played Street Fighter and they want to play Street Fighter in order to get a taste for what it was like and see if whether it's something they want to do, I would point them in the direction of 4. I think 4 is the most approachable of the existing Street Fighter games, especially the modern ones. Like Third Strike, I think has a lot of complex mechanics that can make it overwhelming for someone who's new. And if they jumped into Third Strike now, you know, they would have a harder time picking up with those mechanics and therefore may be discouraged and not want to play it anymore. With 5, I think it's also the same thing with those mechanics. And so by playing 4, I feel that they would have an easier time adapting those mechanics and then go to get ready to then jump to Third Strike or 5 to pick up those more advanced mechanics and become a long-term Street Fighter fan.
Yeah, I actually have to agree with Bobby on that. I think 4 is very a complete game. It's very approachable to newcomers, and it's, you know, it's more modern looking than something like Street Fighter 2. Besides that, I would say Alpha, Street Fighter Alpha 3 specifically. The roster is humongous. It's a very easy game to play. I've noticed that the moves to pull off on Alpha are easier to do. And it's just a very, even by today's standards, I know it's a 2D game, but even by today's standards, it's a very very nice looking game to look at, right? Yeah. As far as the Street Fighter 3 series, I think it's a little too technical for a newcomer, especially like parry systems and how complex some of those characters are, like Q and some of those other characters that I really am not very good at all. So that's going to be my 2 votes is 4 and Alpha 3.
What say you, Gino?
Same, I think probably 4. And I would even say, I mean, you know, if you, it's still kind of timeless to look at. I mean, Alpha 3. Alpha 3 is a great place to start. It's pretty nuts and bolts the same as, I mean, in some ways to 2. Obviously it's its own thing, but so yeah, Alpha 3 or 4, but probably leaning more towards 4 like you all.
Cool. Well, that's it for today, guys. You guys have any final words you'd like to say before we close out?
I noticed nobody showed any love for Street Fighter EX series. I want to know why that is.
So I actually really like Street Fighter EX2 Alpha like Plus, and then even Street Fighter EX3. They're fun to play, but they're not good Street Fighter games. It's like if you're to try to do those competitively, they're not balanced at all. So there's like some characters that are way stronger, and you know you can be totally cheap and everything. The company, Eureka, is that what it is, Gino?
That's it.
Yeah. So they actually came out with their own fighting game with the EX characters that were not Street Fighter characters, and it's called EX Fighting Layer or something like that. And the mechanics are very similar to Street Fighter, but it's not balanced well, and it's not fun to play an unbalanced fighting game to me.
What about SVC Chaos?
That's probably the exception. And
Right?
I did explain in the arcade episode why I love SVC Chaos so much, but
Yeah, I think we could go on forever about the Versus series because those are completely. I mean, they're still Street Fighter games, but they're totally different beasts entirely. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
The mechanics are different, and yeah.
yeah. So
I personally have never played any of the EX games, so I could not speak about them at all.
Yeah, for me, the EX games, I actually, I think I played some on emulators, and they're not really that boring. They're actually kind of fun to play, but
they're fun to play.
man, those graphics are not pretty to look at, man. I know graphics aren't everything, but those are just they're at a point where we were just getting into like polygon gaming and 3D gaming, and I can't go back to stuff like that anymore. It's too ugly.
EX3 still looks pretty good. It is a PS2 era game, so.
Oh, is it really?
Mm-hmm. EX3.
Oh, I thought it was PS1. I didn't know that.
No, it was the first one and the second one. You're like, because once again, Capcom had like so many different versions of the EX series except for EX3, but the first one was like EX, EX Plus Alpha, and then Street Fighter EX2, Street Fighter EX2 Plus, I think like Plus Upper Alpha, or I mean, so many different versions. And going back to Alpha, so there's Street Fighter Alpha, which only I think has one version, but then Street Fighter 2, Alpha 2 has 3 versions.
Wait, what are the 3 versions of that? I actually only know one of them.
There's Street Fighter Alpha 2, there's Street Fighter Alpha 2 Gold, which actually came in the Street Fighter collection on PS1.
Oh, and the Saturn too.
Yes, and the Saturn as well. And I think there's another version. I'll have to look it up again. But then Street Fighter Alpha 3 had Alpha 3, and then it had Alpha 3 Upper, where they added like a bunch of characters from 2, because like Guile wasn't in the original Alpha 3. He was unlockable.
Yeah, so the Street Fighter Alpha 3 was an arcade release originally, and the one that was created for the PlayStation 1 was basically Upper, because they ported the PlayStation and Dreamcast version back to the arcade as Upper, and it's that version with the extra characters.
Yeah, and then there's kind of like a different version on the Alpha Anthology. It's Upper, but it still has more characters. And then the final one is Street Fighter Alpha 3 Max, which is on PSP, which has the most amount of characters. And they added Yoon, Maki from Final Fight 2, Ingrid, which was an original character that was supposed to be on the Capcom Fighting All-Stars, and Eagle from Street Fighter, well, the first Street Fighter.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you guys for coming in today so we could have this very in-depth discussion about our love of Street Fighter, about why we love it, and why we haven't played some of the games like EX.
Or Street Fighter the movie.
Or Street Fighter the movie.
Which
the
one?
game.
Oh, actually, I've never really played the Saturn version.
Well, they said that the console ports are better because they're redone. Like, they're very different compared to the arcade, but they're still not very good.
Yeah, those I've never played either. I don't plan to.
What are all
I'm
the
good.
side games? That's what I'm trying to think, because there's the mainline series, there's the Street Fighter Alpha series, there's the EX series, but I know there's some, what else is there, Gino? Can you think?
Super Puzzle Fighter?
Yeah, like Puzzle Fighter,
It's not a fighting game.
Fighter 2010. I mean, you go off.
I'm talking about actual fighting games, like, because EX, Alpha, and the mainline series are all fighting games.
I mean, probably. I mean, if you're talking purely fighting games, you would just be talking about versus and dimensions like that. But anything else, I think that's it.
Okay, I was just making sure.
I don't think we missed anything.
Yeah, sorry to interrupt your outro. Bobby.
No, we're good. We're good. So thank you guys for coming out tonight so we could have this discussion on Street Fighter. It's definitely the one thing that we all like. To say that we love it isn't just enough of a word to describe it, because we love the series, but we also live and breathe it. We look at it and we're critical of it. We don't just go, oh, it's the greatest thing ever. When there's things that go wrong, we say, oh yeah, there's things about this that need to be improved. And so it's very important that you need to be able to look at both sides of your game and be able to say, well, yeah, this is what works and what doesn't work. And some people aren't very good at that when it comes to their game series. They're just super defensive about things. So I'm glad we're not like that. But anyway, thank you guys again. Next time we get together, it looks like we might be doing some Mortal Kombat or talking some Mortal Kombat. At this point in time, we don't know who's going to be visiting that one, but we might see some familiar faces from previous podcasts. So thank you guys for listening, and we will see you guys next time. Bye.
Bye.
Adios.
So, are you ready to practice your quarter circle forward punch? Or maybe you prefer to charge your attack so you can draw your opponents in? Whatever your choice, you will not be disappointed with any Street Fighter. Except for Street Fighter the movie, the game. Please never play it. Please, for the love of your gamer's soul, do not play it. For those of you who have been vigorously training in Street Fighter since its inception, you know what to do. But if you're like me and left it in the past, now is a perfect time to revisit. However, if this is your first round, pun intended, I highly recommend you start with Ultra Street Fighter 4, which can be found on PS3, PS4, Xbox 360, Xbox One, and even PC. Heck, there's even a version on 3DS, but I wouldn't pick it over the console or PC. This episode's opening music, titled Jazzy New York City 99 by Hideki Okugawa, is heard during the Ken and Alex stage in Street Fighter 3rd Strike. This new jazz-influenced theme perfectly embodies the gritty, spray-painted stained subway station being used as an arena by a cocksure Ken and a no-nonsense Alex. The closing music, titled Morning Miss Bay by Hideyuki Fukasawa, is heard during the stage of the same name in Street Fighter 4. The up-tempo synth-style music surprisingly blends in with the beautiful recreation of Halong Bay in Vietnam, including flora-infused juts of rocky formations, the low light from the oncoming sunrise playing off the mist, as well as the creaky wooden boat where fighters clash. Check the description for links to the audio tracks. Well, thanks for tuning in, and we'll be back in 2 weeks when we discuss another sci-fi first-person shooter series, Halo. Peace!